Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to tonight's webinar. This is the 7th webinar in our series, Agroecology and the Transition to Sustainable Food Systems. It's a pleasure to have you all here, and we are joined by 4 fantastic panelists tonight and are really looking forward to explore the next element of agroecology with you, co-creation and sharing of knowledge. And just as a reminder for those of you who have already joined us in the past, and just a short summary of what we're doing here for those of you joining for the first time. Over a series of weeks, we're exploring this question of how can agroecology help us transition to a sustainable food system. And we are structuring this exploration through the 10 elements of agroecology as proposed through a participatory process run by the UN FAO. And we're looking at each of these elements, taking one element a week. And tonight, the element we're focusing on is co-creation and sharing of knowledge. And as a reminder, we also have these 13 principles of agroecology, which were developed through a different process, yet have a lot of overlap. And just to highlight that in these 13 principles, we also see co-creation of knowledge and participation as central principles in this group of principles around securing social equity. So although we are focusing on an element each week, we really would like to stress that we are actually interested in how all of these different elements and principles work together to help us move from incremental changes in the food system to more transformational changes where we can redesign, rebuild, reshape our food system so that it is sustainable and equitable for all. So we hope that tonight, as we explore co-creation and sharing of knowledge, we start to understand how it also connects with these other elements. But in focus with co-creation and sharing of knowledge are some key points. So really an understanding that innovations respond better to local challenges when they're co-created through participatory processes. That these co-creation processes in agroecology importantly blend different forms of knowledge, traditional, indigenous, practical, as well as scientific knowledge. And this is really a cornerstone of the approach of agroecology to value and bring together these different types of knowledge that we have. And this co-creation and sharing of knowledge element also takes into account the fact that both informal and formal education is really important in sharing the innovations that could result from these co-creation processes. And that's a part of this understanding of this element as well. So to explore this topic with us further tonight, I'm really happy to welcome our panelists with us. Manuel Frossard is hopefully joining us very soon. He's a professor of plant nutrition here at ETH Zurich. We also have Jahan Akiki. She's the managing director of Farms Not Arms and the founder of IOI Strategic Design. She's from Lebanon, working in Lebanon, but actually in Bulgaria as she's calling in tonight. Benjamin Groive is also joining us. He's working with FIBL as an expert on digital trainings for African farmers and is co-founder of an organization called Farm Better, which he's going to tell us more about tonight. And finally, Johanna Herrigel is with us as a panelist as well. Until very recently, I think 2 days ago, she was part of the executive management of the Food Council in Zurich and is now focusing her efforts as a co-founder of the Urban Agroecology Innovation Network and also one of the organizers of Agroecology Week, which is taking place at the moment. And she's going to give us some insights into Agroecology Week at the end of the session today, so you know how you can get involved with that if you would like to keep exploring this topic in more depth this week. And just as I'm speaking, Emmanuel is joining us as well. So Emmanuel, great to have you here. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and actually hand over to our panelists. So what we've asked for them to prepare this evening is a short input for each of you, just taking maximum 5 minutes to share a little bit their understanding of this element that we're exploring tonight, how it has shown up in their work, and some challenges and opportunities that we face moving forward on this particular element, and also integrating it with the other elements of agroecology that we're really interested in. So I think we'll get started hearing from Jahan. If you would like to just give a short input around your work and how it links to tonight's topic of co-creation and sharing of knowledge.
Yes, thank you so much, Michelle, and it's great to be here, and thanks for everyone who's listening, for joining. My name is Jihan, and as Michelle said, I'm the managing director and co-founder of Farms Not Arms. Farms Not Arms is, wait, let me actually full screen. Farms Not Arms is a collective, an international collective of individuals and organizations that have been working together in order to design a solution around food security, climate change, and social cohesion. And we started Farms Not Arms with the goal of building a scalable model, but starting in by focusing on Lebanon. And we've, throughout our process, it is fundamentally a design process. So we have been using design thinking and systems thinking and have been employing co-creation on a lot of different levels in order to come up with our project. And so by fusing design thinking and systems thinking, we basically use different tools to zoom in and out in order to really understand the big picture, but understand what, work with people on the ground, understanding what the problems are, and together build a solution. So we started with in the Bekaa, which is the agricultural valley of Lebanon, and it's also the area with the highest percentage of refugees in Lebanon, and Lebanon is the country with the highest percentage of refugees per capita in the world. So the Bekaa basically is, has a lot of refugees and host communities living side by side. So I spent a lot of time there talking to refugees, talking to local communities, and understanding where they get their food from, how they work in agriculture, what are the challenges they face, what are some of the ideas they have around that. And then we had a more formal design sprint where we invited local community members, around 30 to 40 of them, and we spent a day really, mapping out problems. They were also talking to other people in their communities, so we were getting inputs from other places as well, and then mapping out the challenges, the themes, and coming up with initial ideas for a project. And then it quickly became evident to us that even though our starting point was refugee food security, that we can't really just focus on refugees in the Lebanon context, but we moved our focus to inclusive food system and how can we work on a solution that helps both Lebanese and refugees. And this is more important now because Lebanon is having a huge economic, social, financial, and food crisis. So after we came up with, after we gathered these inputs, we then had, sorry, I don't know if, okay, yeah. We then had an echoing design sprint in New York, where we basically had different multidisciplinary experts from across different spectrums of farming, from biodynamic farming to super high-tech vertical farming, come together with architects, engineers, designers, and work on preliminary solutions, talk to people in Lebanon, ask them questions, and really come up with ideas. And you can see this on the right of the screen. On the left is the Lebanese design sprint. Then from that, we also started meeting some of our team members that became part of the collective. And we started the second phase, which was the blueprinting and concept generation phase. So during that phase, we were testing out a lot of different ideas on the local front. We talked to a lot of different people, from local farmers to specific agroforestry farmers that we found in Lebanon, to soil experts, to market experts, to even, people making food in Lebanon. What are their food preferences? Looked at the local diet and what the local diet contains, and looked at the overall system. And we're using, a multitude of digital tools, WhatsApp, Zoom, sharing different things and building our model, which ended up in this. And so this is basically our vision for our project, which is essentially an integrated farm that is combines regenerative agriculture and agroforestry with experimental low-tech hydroponic systems in greenhouses, which you can see towards the upper part of it. And the center of our farm, though, is actually a community center where we view the farm as a knowledge hub and a community space where people can come together, learn different things, learn about how to plant through workshops, education programs, host dinners, and have this farm really be a hub that can train people and act as a meeting space for that to spill over to neighboring lands and then have an impact on a national food system. And so we submitted our vision last year to the Rockefeller Food Vision System Prize, and we were selected as one of the semi-finalists, which and won a grant, which helped us start implementing this project. And so during implementation, we also had a lot of co-creation and adaptation happening, where we built a team of local farmers, all under 30, all passionate about permaculture, regeneration, agroforestry. We were adapting our models, stripping it down to its essentials to really understand, what is needed right now. And then from that, we also started, adapting what we're doing. So we started working with a community of local women to produce food. We started working with local food banks to donate food. And we're keeping on evolving our project based on the local inputs and the local needs of the community. And even though, sometimes co-creation takes longer and can have its own set of challenges, it needs more time. Sometimes it needs more, trying to figure out where to get the resources from, but it definitely makes it more embedded in the community so that no matter what happens, you can adapt and you can work with the needs of the community, and it will always have an impact. And I really think that our design process is something that has engaged so many different actors, and from that created a lot of ripple effects even into other projects around us, and has created more local impact than, if we had just come from New York and done a project by ourselves. This is my story, basically, and story of my project. And I'm sure we're going to talk more about things in questions, but I wanted to hand it over to the second panelist.
Thanks so much, Jahan. I think it's an incredible example of collaborating not only across disciplines, but sectors and scales, and how you can use both kind of analog and digital tools to do that. So looking forward to chat more with you about it. Thanks a lot. Our second panelist is Benjamin Groib, and he's going to share some insights from his work at both FIBL and the organization he's co-founded, Farm Better. Thanks, Benjamin.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks a lot for having me. I have to say, every time I see those FAO Principles of Agroecology shown, my heart beats a little bit faster, because I was part of the team that organized this 2014 symposium on agroecology at FAO, and then out of that grew all the work that led to these principles. So it just always brings a little nostalgia, and I'm so happy to see it now being used more and more, agroecology, but also those principles. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about the work I've been doing over the last few years. My name is Benjamin Groib, and I didn't bring any slides. I just brought an old Android phone, and I brought it because I use it a lot for testing content and trainings and apps, to try to be as close as possible to the people who will actually use it, the farmers, mostly in Kenya and Sub-Saharan Africa we work with. And you might wonder, how many farmers are actually using this kind of stuff in Sub-Saharan Africa. According to a recent report, already 13% of the more or less 250 million smallholders or pastoralists are using some sort of digital service. So that's 33 million farmers. Of course, not all smartphones, but still, it's quite incredible, I find, how that has changed. Now, you might say, okay, that's great, but that has nothing to do with agroecology or co-creation. So it's true. I work a lot on digital advisory, digital trainings, and that per se isn't anything agroecological. You can do that for any kind of agriculture, conventional, green revolution, whatever you want. But the interesting thing is that I think a lot of agroecological practices are more location and site specific, and they're more knowledge intensive often. And there, a technology like a smartphone, where you can have farmers communicate horizontally much more, where you can have two-way communications between people working on a project and farmers, and where you can bring localized knowledge, can actually have a bigger potential than I think on, let's say, conventional agriculture, where you don't need so much knowledge. It's not as knowledge intensive often. So what what do I do? Why am I here? I work at FIBL, the Research Institute of Organic Agriculture based in Frick. I work on projects, especially in East Africa, Kenya. There I lead a project on digital training materials. We have an Organic Africa manual at FIBL that was developed together with local partners across actually sub-Saharan Africa a while ago. And we just wanted to try to bring it closer to farmers from where it is right now, which is a website where you can freely access it. This project was funded by the Bachmann Foundation. It's a pilot project. We've turned, working with farmers, getting surveys on their knowledge needs. We then turned what was most relevant to them in 7 modules and an SMS-based training that's freely available, WhatsApp-based training, a smartphone app also. And we're seeing a lot of potential, but a lot of limitations also. And I think what's really interesting is this importance of trust and importance of human interactions. So, a lot of farmers also from the surveys we've done afterwards, they say, yeah, this is great, I love this. But also a lot of them say, okay, this is great. Now, who do I talk to actually implement it? Who do I talk to go to the next step? So this human interaction is just key, and linking, digital trainings with actual human beings and local partners is really core. We, for example, work with BioVision Africa Trust in Kenya. And what I've liked a lot about this project is that we've worked with them on developing these courses and bringing in farmers and bring the training to farmers. And they've seen the potential and they said, hey, this is great. We're going to use some funds from this project to actually upgrade our own infrastructure so that we can start sending out these SMSs ourselves, because before it was a technology provider. So they've done that. And they said, hey, we have agents working with farmers. We want to train them on how to use this complementary app-based training that supports the trainers. So that's really cool. And I like how that has worked. Let's see if and how we can scale that. Then my second kind of work is around Farm Better, which is a social enterprise. We were a few friends at FAO or colleagues, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and we started working on climate resilience. And we started building the first app FAO ever had on the Play Store, which was essentially a survey, an Android survey. And it worked great. We could go, we tested it. We went from Burkina Faso to Angola to Uganda. We worked with a bunch of farmers in a participatory manner to try to understand how terms would be used and so on, and how we can use the app. So it worked great on measuring resilience. But then, the farmers would say, yes, this is great. I now know I have great resilience in terms of access to water, but not so great resilience in terms of the diversity of income sources. So what do I do? And we said, well, we don't know. I mean, the whole point of this is just to measure and to see, is the project successful or not? And that was very unsatisfying, because the so what question just couldn't be answered. So based on that, we started building Farm Better. Based on a human-centered design approach. We started with pilots, with prototypes, went with those to the farmers. We basically built based on the WCAT database. We have a database of sustainable land management practices from WCAT, and we match that with farmers and their needs. So the farmers can share their location if they want to. They share their priorities. They share, their exposure to climate shocks, and we provide them with targeted knowledge based on their information on how they can improve their climate resilience. And there, talking about co-creation and exchange of knowledge, one thing that's really important or interesting there is that, that's still a bit, it's two-way, the farmers communicate what they want and then they get tailored knowledge, but it's not horizontal. And what we've done just since July is we've set up a community forum, and that's something where we have most activity at the moment on the app. It's still quite small. We're working with just 50 target pilot farmers in Kenya right now, but where we've gotten a lot of traction is farmers saying, hey, asking each other questions and answering those questions. And I think there's huge potential there. And then one last point, sorry, I maybe I might be a little long. So technology is obviously not a panacea, and a lot of issues that exist already around power dynamics and agency and who has power and access to resources, they're just reproduced. One thing we see a lot on smartphones and digital devices is that women have, on average, less access to smartphones, to agriculture information, to internet. So we're part of a project called AgriPath, where we're researching and working once again with human-centered design with farmers, especially female and young farmers, to try to figure out how can we design, user interfaces? How can we design approaches that cater more to women? One thing is, if we use a chatbot that can tell your emotional state, or can kind of work with that and adapt their answers based on if you're more in a positive or negative state, does that work better for women or not? We're only just starting, so we don't know anything on that, but we're really definitely gonna try to work on these things to try to also improve women's access to digital advice. Okay, I'll stop here. I'm sure there'll be lots to talk about.
Thanks so much, Benjamin. Your last statement there left me with thousands of questions, so we definitely going to pick that up afterwards. But thanks so much for sharing your really interesting work that shows the potential of digital approaches to, I think, combine that with community building and network building, which is really the key to what that horizontal collaboration, and also the limitations you mentioned in just replicating power structures that are kind of the central bottleneck to a lot of change that we're trying to do. So thank you very much. I'd love to hand over now to Johanna for her to share a little bit more about the work that she's doing. Thanks so much, Johanna.
Thanks a lot, Michelle. So I'm very happy to be here tonight and to discuss with all of you. I'm from the Innovation Network Urban Agroecology, as Michelle introduced. And we actually have this innovation network and also the so-called Technikum, Urbane Agroecology. So in English, that's maybe a bit complicated to translate. But what is important to me is that these are networks and projects that have really come out of the work of the Food Council and members of the Food Council here in Zurich, and really also grounded in the experience and coming out of the community-supported agriculture scheme in Zurich North that is called Mehr als Gemüse. So in English, that will be more than vegetables. And as the name indicates, our community-supported agriculture scheme does produce vegetables and much more. And so we've gone through an entire process of developing the CSA, and today we're at a point where clearly the entire CSA is oriented towards agroecology, fostering agroecological practices throughout the entire CSA, and also recognizing biodiversity and fostering biodiversity as an own business branch in itself, which is quite unique for CSAs. So that being said, maybe that makes clear how we are grounding our activities. So it's really in fostering and spreading agroecological practices and knowledges in Switzerland, which is maybe also a bit different to the other presenters we had so far. So it's really something that we are experiencing, that on the one hand, there is a need, so there's a will and a need to go towards more agroecological practices in farming and transforming the entire food system along agroecological principles here in Switzerland. But yet there is really a lack of knowledge, and especially of practical know-how for people to do that in their everyday lives, to do that on the farms and so on. So, and as I said before, we are really based in a city context. And that makes it even more particular, right? Because that means for us that we are developing urban agroecology, both as an approach and a concept to city development and to transform the food system, but also as a practice. And so if we say that agroecological practices and knowledges really aren't always formalized and institutionalized, and certainly aren't mainstream, that all the more holds for urban agroecology. That is something that is very much at the beginning and developing. And so what we do within the Technikum Urbane Agroecology is that we have 3 pillars. And because we originated out of a vegetable community-supported agriculture scheme, I brought vegetables to illustrate that. So we have 3 pillars. We have the living lab, we have the lighthouse or prototype projects, and then we have a project-based training for community gardeners. So for the living lab, I brought the salad. I hope you can see it. And I brought the salad because it's really big and it spreads in many ways. And it sort of symbolizes what we're trying to do with the living lab. So the living lab and urban agroecology really comes out of the practice and of our daily experiences. So it's not pushed by research from the starting point, which is for living labs, usually they're first initiated by researchers. So that's particular for our case. And we are very closely collaborating between practitioners of agroecology, researchers on agroecology, and key also really is the city administration and diverse other stakeholders. And so it's really a process of co-creating the innovations that we need, and then applying, testing, and implementing, thereby then testing those innovations, and in the end co-evaluating the results that we find. So it's very it's very much a co-creational process that is today at a starting point. So we are really these days starting with the first steps of the first module of our living lab. So we're very excited. The second vegetable that I brought is a leek. The leek, because it's really tall, you can see it afar sort of. So I brought these for our prototypes and lighthouse projects. They are key to us. So we're implementing on the different fields that we have. We implement different prototypes because we want to demonstrate the diversity that agroecology can take, and also demonstrate that if you take the principles of agroecology, then that results in something very specific and maybe also unique in the different places. And here really knowledge is also key. So it's applying knowledge, but it's also sharing a very grounded knowledge, and making knowledge, this knowledge really livable, or experiencing it by coming to the plot and to the field. And then in the third aspect that we have, so that's where I brought the garlic, because it's very much in the ground, and maybe grows and you don't see the result that you get straight from the beginning. So it's a bit symbolizing what we do with the project-based training for community gardeners. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we really have a lack of practitioners in this field, whether that is for agroecological practices generally in Switzerland, but also specifically in an urban context where you have a stronger dimension than elsewhere on community building and community management at the same time as regenerative agricultural practices and so on. So what we do in the project-based training for community gardeners is really to have a long-term training of roughly 18 months, based in the projects that I mentioned before, or grounded in these projects. And there are parts, there also we have different parts of generating and transmitting knowledge. So on the one hand, we have external experts coming in, but we also have a peer-to-peer learning amongst those partaking in the training. And important to us is also that we have a space for self-reflection, where you can reflect back on the learning process and develop that further depending on where you're standing at that moment. And our aim actually throughout all of that is really not to generate people who know everything, the whole all the different aspects that you sort of need to know about agroecology and urban agroecology, but to have specialized experts who are very well networked, so that you can mobilize the knowledge that you need through the network that you have. And I think that's also something that is very much grounded in our experience as a CSA, because that's how we work. We have many very competent members who can do one aspect or the other. And so we share a lot of knowledge amongst us, and we learn from each other. And we evolve as we do that together as a group and as a network. So sorry, I'm running late. Yeah, I end here. And I'm very happy to answer questions and discuss that further.
Thanks so much, Johanna. Really interesting work. And I think that's what's so exciting about agroecology in an urban context, is that proximity of all of these different stakeholders and so many opportunities to not only co-create together, but also learn from one another. So thanks so much for sharing that. I'll hand over now to Emmanuel Frossard, who's going to share some of his insights around co-creation and knowledge sharing from a research context. Emmanuel, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle. Does it work? Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Voilà. Okay, so good evening, everybody. This is a pleasure to be here tonight. So I am an agronomist. I'm working on soil and nutrients, but when it is about the use of agricultural practices or the use of a specific nutrient management technique, then I think of two things. The first thing is that this is the farmer who is taking finally the decision to implement or not a technique in his field or her field. This is the decision of the farmer. And the other thing is that if we co-create, this is an hypothesis, I have not tested it, but if we co-create a new agricultural practices with farmers taking their context into account, we think that there is a much higher chance that this technique, this practice, will be sustainably used by farmers in comparison to a technique that is coming per helicopter on the farm. So here I will present what we did on knowledge co-creation. So we speak in a project about co-construction and knowledge sharing in the YAMSIS project we conducted in West Africa. On the left side of the screen, you see Grégoire. Grégoire is a lobby, is from the southwest of Burkina. And you see that Grégoire is particularly proud of his yams. As a yam, these are these big tubers you see in his arms. And he's particularly proud because these big tubers, they are used for food, as well they make food, which is dishes that are extremely well appreciated by the population in this region. You can get a lot of cash with this type of tubers on the market. And this is culturally also very important. So if you are able to get such tubers, then you are a very important man in society. So this is important, as well, this crop is important for the livelihood of the people in West Africa. But producing such a bumper crop, bumper yield is really not easy anymore. This is the growing of yam, so the cropping of yam has become more and more difficult with time. So nowadays, tuber yields are very low. So you get maximum 10 tons per hectare, maybe a little bit more, but you could get easily 20 tons, 30 tons per hectare. And then this is also the point is that in order to be able to grow this crop, very often this is done in a slash and burn system. And you see what the slash and burn system is on the right of the screen. You see what this slash and burn system is doing in the landscape. So this gives terrible landscapes where the biodiversity is basically devastated. Beyond that, this is a crop which is really needed, as what people want and appreciate it still at the urban level. So a lot of people eat it, but the policymakers actually are not at all interested. The national institutions are not at all interested in this crop. There is no policy. There is very little research. There is no extension. So even so, there are a lot of things to be improved there. So how do we do it? We worked in our project in 4 sites, 2 in Côte d'Ivoire, 2 in Burkina Faso, and we started with the build-up of so-called innovation platform at each of these sites. What did we do in this innovation platform? So this was a gathering of people basically who were interested in yams, and a gathering of people coming from different parts of society. So the idea was to identify, to rank to identify the problem and to rank them. And based on this ranking, then to develop together options, knowledge that would allow to solve this problem, or at least to start solving this problem. The problems that were identified were lack of space. There is no space anymore to grow yam in many places in West Africa. Soils are degraded. The rain are really bad. And also, we have a problem with the low quality of the planting material. So in order to solve that, after long discussions in every innovation platform, we agreed that, for instance, higher planting density, crop rotation could be used to solve the lack of space, nutrient input to address the problem of soil degradation, and the use of new variety, respectively healthy tuber, to improve the problem of the low planting quality. And what you see here in this ellipse, this is the, we tested these options in a scientist managed plot. Then we evaluated all together with the stakeholders the results. This led us to change the experimental design after 1 year, things that you never do in agronomy. And then we went for another cycle where we have again tested even this new experimental design. And where also farmers started to plant themselves, also to use themselves the innovation they were interested in their own field. Again, the things were optimized. And we have done this last ellipse where actually farmers now completely work on their own field. And always with the, each time we have this co-construction followed by a co-evaluation. This has been mentioned. For us, the co-evaluation was very important. And the sharing, at least at this stage, that was at the local level. Now, what are we doing? We want to further share the results, to go then from the local rather to the regional, respectively national level. So some materials have been coming with the results coming from the project have been introduced in fact sheets, in posters, we are preparing videos as well, even so that this information does not get lost with time. And we are also currently playing a role game, so in Côte d'Ivoire and in Burkina, a role game where people have to manage their field, have to manage their yam, they have to make some money, they have to feed their family. Bref, where people take decisions, and at the end of the game, they explain us why they have taken a decision or another. And what we are doing is not only to play with farmers, but also farmers who were in contact with, but also with farmers which were not in contact with us, respectively academicians, respectively extension agents, or also policymakers. So with that, we hope that we share even our knowledge and that we improve also the awareness of this crop, which has been there actually for 7,000 years in West Africa, but which is not really taken care of. And I thank you very much for your attention.